المدنيين مجرم.
Good afternoon on this Thursday, February 20th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. A pro-Syrian Arab Democratic Party official is assassinated by masked gunmen in the northern city of Tripoli. The suspect in Beirut's twin suicide car bombings confesses the task of monitoring the Iranian Cultural Center and Al-Manar TV. And at least 100 protesters killed in renewed clashes with police in central Kiev, shattering Ukraine's truce. An Arab Democratic Party official named Abdulrahman Diab was assassinated by masked gunmen in the northern city of Tripoli, triggering violence that left 2 people killed so far and 5 wounded. Diab was the father of one of the suspects in August's twin mosque bombings in Tripoli. Diab's son has admitted to parking a booby-trapped car that exploded near As-Salam Mosque. As news broke out about Diab's assassination, gunmen from the rival neighborhoods of Jabal Muhsin and Bab al-Tabbene engaged in sniper attacks. At least 6 people were injured in the clashes that later involved the use of rocket-propelled grenades. The army, which responded to the sources of fire, then blocked the highway that links Tripoli with the northern district of Akkad and helped the evacuation of students from several local schools. A Lebanese national of Al Hilfa family who was arrested has confessed of being tasked by the Lebanese Sheikh Sirajuddin Zuraykhat of the Abdullah Azam brigades with monitoring Al-Manar TV and the Iranian Cultural Center. The twin suicide car bombings that occurred yesterday in the Beirut suburb of Bir Hassan near the Iranian Cultural Center killed about 8 people and wounded more than 120. The second attack in less than 4 months targeting Iranian interests in Lebanon. Investigations were also able to uncover the identity of one of the suicide bombers, Nidal Hisham al-Mughir, a Palestinian from the Baysiriye camp. His family had reported that al-Mughir went missing about a few days ago, and his father identified the picture circulated by the Lebanese army after the blast. The Minister of Interior, Nuhad Mashnou, issued an order requesting security enhancement in the proximity of Al-Manar TV after the bombing. And a group of angry men in Saida burned down yesterday night al-Mughir's family house and a car that belonged to his father in retaliation. President Michel Sleiman highlights the importance of the defense strategy in combating terrorism in Lebanon. He says the measures taken on the ground to combat terrorism can be complemented by the resumption of talks on national defense strategy. The talks that were started at the National Dialogue Table include a section on confronting terrorism. He explained after holding talks with Acting General Prosecutor Samir Hammoud on the latest findings on the terrorist blasts that have taken place in the country. He also stated that discussing a defense strategy has become a necessity in order to limit the danger of terrorism and completely eliminate it from Lebanon. In addition, the president praised security, military, and judicial authorities on their handling of terrorist cases. The latest bombing to take place in Lebanon targeted the Beirut southern suburb of Bir Hassan just yesterday. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has resumed distribution of aid at the besieged Yarmouk camp in southern Damascus in Syria. Chris Gunnis says distribution of desperately needed food and medicine was halted on February 8th after clashes broke out, but resumed on Wednesday. It is not yet clear if distribution continued today, but staff have been able to distribute food parcels to 280 families the previous day. Gunnis noted that work had been disrupted when the crowd of desperate civilians surged towards the distribution area. Around 18,000 Palestinian civilians are trapped inside the camp, which is mostly controlled by rebel forces and has been under a tight government siege since June. But a Palestinian official said on Sunday that all Syrian opposition fighters had withdrawn from the camp. A development residents said they hoped could lead to the lifting of the siege. At least 100 protesters have been killed and 500 hurt in renewed clashes with police in central Kiev, shattering an hours-old truce between EU foreign ministers and Ukraine's embattled president. Mass protesters hurled Molotov cocktails and rocks at thick lines of armed anti-riot troops in Kiev's central Independence Square, the epicenter of the former Soviet country's 3-month-old political crisis. Demonstrators pushed police forces back around 200 meters to retake control of the entire square, which anti-government protesters have occupied since November. Police used rubber bullets to try to repel the assault and claimed that a sniper had wounded 20 officers by firing live ammunition from the window of a building overlooking the smoke-filled square. This comes just hours after Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych called a truce with the opposition following a spurt of violence that killed more than 24 people in less than 2 days. And U.S. President Barack Obama is urging Ukraine to avoid violence against what he calls peaceful protests or face consequences as the United States considers joining European partners to impose sanctions aimed at ending the deadly street clashes that have left at least 100 dead and hundreds more injured.
The United States strongly condemns. In Venezuela, rather than trying to distract from its own failings by making up false accusations against diplomats from the United States, the government ought to focus on addressing the legitimate grievances of the Venezuelan people. So, along with the Organization of American States, we call on the Venezuelan government to release protesters that it's detained and engage in real dialogue. And all parties have an obligation to work together to restrain violence and restore calm. With regard to Ukraine, along with our European partners, we will continue to engage all sides. And we continue to stress to President Yanukovych and the Ukrainian government that they have the primary responsibility to prevent the kind of terrible violence that we've seen, to withdraw riot police, to work with the opposition to restore security and human dignity and move the country forward. And this includes progress towards a multi-party technical government that can work with the international community on a support package and adopt reforms necessary for free and fair elections next year. Ukrainians are a proud and resilient people who've overcome extraordinary challenges in their history, and that's a pride and strength that I hope they draw on now. We've obviously seen reports of a truce between the government and the opposition. If the truce is implemented, it could provide space for the sides to resolve their disagreements peacefully. And going forward, we'll continue to do whatever we can to support Ukrainians as they seek a peaceful solution and respond to the aspirations of the Ukrainian people for a strong, unified democracy that's fully integrated into the international community.
Coming up next, Facebook announces that it is going to buy WhatsApp, the text messaging service, for worth $19 billion. Stay tuned, this and more when we return. Welcome back. An Egyptian court is to try Al Jazeera journalists Peter Greste, Mohammed Fahmy, and Bahir Mohammed for allegedly having links to a terrorist organization and spreading false news. Since their arrest, the journalists have staged protests worldwide demanding their release and rejecting claims that the three of them have links to the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt's former ruling party, which has since been designated a terrorist group. The journalists face charges including aiding a terrorist organization and endangering national society. Now, some of the charges leveled against them carry prison sentences of 5 to 15 years. Al Jazeera has said only 9 of those charged are members of staff and that they were merely reporting the situation in Egypt. The case is one of many that have led to criticism of Egypt's military-backed government, with rights groups pointing to growing intolerance for dissent in the Arab world's most populous country. Human Rights Watch demands that the U.S. government investigate a drone strike that killed 12 people in Yemen during a December wedding procession, saying it may have violated international law. The attack raised Syrian concerns about whether U.S. forces were abiding by stricter rules recently announced by President Obama for drone attacks. A dozen men were killed and 15 others wounded, including the bride, when 4 Hellfire missiles struck a convoy of 11 vehicles at a wedding celebration on December 12th near the central town of Rada'a, according to the New York-based rights group. Although U.S. and Yemeni officials said the dead belonged to al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, witnesses and relatives told Human Rights Watch that all the casualties were civilians and not ACOP fighters. Libyans are heading to the polls to elect a body that will draft a new constitution, marking a milestone in the country's transition after the toppling of Muammar Gaddafi back in 2011. Western powers hope a peaceful vote will help move Libya a bit closer towards democracy, but it comes at a time of heightened political tensions a threat by powerful former rebel militias to dissolve the interim General National Congress elected in 2012 and ramped up pressure on the weak central government on the eve of the vote. More than 1 million people have registered to vote, but this well below the approximate 3 million who registered for the parliamentary elections last year. The 60 members of the Constitutional Committee will have 120 days to draft the charter and will be divided equally between Libya's 3 regions. The model resembles the committee that drafted Libya's constitution back in 1951 when the country became an independent state. In other world news, hundreds of North and South Korean relatives are seeing each other for the first time in 6 decades at a reunion for families separated by the Korean War. More than 100 mostly elderly South Koreans arrived for the event in North Korea's Diamond Mountain Resort. An estimated 500 South Koreans and 260 North Koreans took part in the meetings. The reunions, which come after North Korea called for better relations between the two sides, will take place from February 20th until the 25th. These are the first reunions since late 2010, a positive sign for inter-Korean relations and a tearful relief for families separated by the world's most heavily fortified border. Finally, Facebook is announcing it is buying the mobile messaging service WhatsApp in a deal worth $19 billion. WhatsApp is a cross-platform mobile app which allows users to exchange messages without having to pay telecom charges. We know all this too well. We live in Lebanon. The purchase is Facebook's biggest acquisition and includes $12 billion in Facebook shares and $4 billion in cash. It calls for an additional $3 billion in restricted stock units to be granted to WhatsApp founders and employees that will vest over 4 years. The WhatsApp deal translates to roughly 9% of Facebook's market value and is bigger than any acquisition made by Google, Apple, or Microsoft. This acquisition comes less than 2 years after Mark Zuckerberg's firm raised $16 billion in the richest technology sector public stock offering. Facebook says the acquisition supports Facebook and WhatsApp's shared mission to bring more connectivity and utility to the world by delivering core internet services efficiently and affordably. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. A pro-Syrian Arab Democratic Party official is assassinated by masked gunmen in Tripoli. Suspect in Beirut's Twin suicide car bombings confesses the task of monitoring the Iranian Cultural Center and Al-Manar TV. And at least 100 protesters killed in renewed clashes with police in central Kiev, shattering Ukraine's truce. Those are your Thursday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a great week ahead, and a great weekend, I should say. Take care.
اللي بيفخر واللي بيقتل المدنيين مجرم.